Hey, this is Jim. There's a moment many of us know. We see suffering in the world, in our neighborhoods, in our families, in ourselves, and something inside us says, do something. And then another voice answers, what if I get it wrong? What if I'm not enough? What if I do too much? At Zen Peacemakers, our mission is to realize our oneness and relieve suffering through contemplative social action. Taking action isn't separate from this practice, it is practice. In this episode, my co-host, Geoff O'Keeffe, sits down with 5 longtime Zen Peacemakers, people who have been living with this question for years. Not as an idea, but in their homes, on city streets, in temples, in fragile, complicated communities. What emerges is not a strategy, it's something more human. Action as relationship, action as ceremony, action as staying when things get uncomfortable. If you've ever wondered whether your act would be too small to matter, if you've ever felt paralyzed between doing too much and not doing enough, this conversation is for you.
We are here today with a wonderful group of friends and teachers to talk about what we titled the intimacy of taking action. In Zen Peacemakers, our foundation rests on the 3 tenets. Those 3 tenets are not knowing, bearing witness, and taking action. And many of us with contemplative practices are familiar with and have a good feel for not knowing and bearing witness. But I had the thought that when it comes to taking action, it's a bit more fraught. I think, maybe I'll speak for myself, the tendency to second guess myself or to doubt or to be nervous or concerned about, am I doing the right thing? How do I know this is the right action? So rather than trying to answer those questions myself, I wanted to gather some friends who are very experienced in this world and have us talk about it a little bit. So I'm very, very happy to have from Helsinki, my friend Mikko Ijäs, and from Los Angeles, Jitsujo Gauthier, and Genjo Marinello from Seattle. Daiken Nelson is here from New York City, and Joshin Byrnes from Vermont, all of whom are longtime peacemakers and have been working in this way for years and years and years. So with the 5 of you, if you could each just, say what it is that you do and maybe just a word about taking action recently. And Mikko, let's go ahead and start because you're the furthest east.
Thank you so much. My name is Mikko, Sensei Mikko, as they call me now. And I'm from Helsinki, Finland. My last name is Ijäs, which is a Russian name. Comes from Elias. So I guess there's a Russian Jewish family at some point in our family. But yeah, I'm from Helsinki and I run our own organization called Helsinki Zen Peacemakers Finland here in Helsinki. And I'm also a chair of a residence committee of a building where I live. It's a home for almost 100 professional artists here in Helsinki, next to the sea. And we constantly have problems arising, and my job is to kind of alleviate the situations, not to kind of explode. And I constantly invite people to council circles with the whole community to deal with problems that we face. And I think that's like my main practice of taking action at the moment, and kind of seeing that how people respond and also to kind of see what works and what doesn't. It's like constantly falling off the wagon and getting back.
Thank you, Mikko. Jitsujo, tell us just a little bit about you.
My name is Jitsujo Gauthier, and I live in Los Angeles. I come from mostly Irish roots, but also a little bit of French Canadian. And I trained at the Zen Center of Los Angeles for about 15 years as a resident, priest, preceptor. I also mentor a lot of people and just try to help them find what makes them feel alive. And I see the practice of street retreats as a way of taking action and bearing witness. And also just in the process of gathering kind of groups of people to just start to sit together. A few of us have decided to start a West Coast Zen Peacemaker group, and just to see if we can, put ourselves in different places and practice the Three Tenets and, see what happens. So those are some ways that I'm taking action.
Thanks, Jitsujo. Thank you. Genjo, would you like to tell us?
I came to Seattle originally as a VISTA volunteer and doing community organizing in the central area of Seattle, and was trained by a Jesuit priest by the name of Father Greg Galuzzo, who also trained Barack Obama a few years later. So I have this neighborhood action kind of background and Zen Peacemaker background, and the habit of a Zen temple here in Seattle, and we have a social action committee that is working mainly to try and help immigrants respond to the difficulties they're facing at this time in this nation. And we have council every Saturday here at our temple, and we make sandwiches for those who are hungry, and we try and be a resource for neighborhood emergencies should they arise, things like that.
Thanks, Genjo. Thank you. Joshin.
Hi, everybody. I'm Joshin. I'm from Vermont, as you heard, and I have a little place here that I started about 7 or 8 years ago called Bread Loaf Mountain Zen Community, which is named after the local mountain, Bread Loaf Mountain. And we started from the beginning as a pretty socially engaged Zen center. Currently, I'd like to say we're kind of a fully integrated kind of project where we have some buildings at the center of which is our meditation hall, but connected to it, sharing walls and property lines, is Gather, which is a drop-in center that opens the door to anyone who comes under any condition, just to have company and meals, laundry, showers, etc. We have a transitional supported housing apartment complex on our property as well, which provides apartments for people transitioning out of prison and out of homelessness. And then we have currently an encampment in our backyard of people who are living rough at the moment and live on the property, but in tents and use our facilities for their own well-being. And then we have a more formal kind of Dharma community, people who would identify as Zen Buddhist or Zen Peacemakers or Buddhist practitioners who come every day for meditation, ritual practices. And now we're beginning to see a lot of kind of interaction among all these different groups where people living rough or living next door. So we're a pretty integrated project that is kind of unfolding in real time all the time with new and interesting challenges and opportunities to respond in ways that feel right.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Joshin. And Daiken, please.
Hi, everyone. So I'm based in New York, in Manhattan. For about 10 years, I've been running a Pamsula Zen Center, which is kind of a traditional meeting for meditation and study and precepts and various things. We have an affiliate in Youngstown, Ohio. I have a student there who's a Unitarian minister, and we run a group, and I visit them every quarter. And then I have another student in White Plains, which is about 25 miles outside the city, and he also coordinates a group there. And then I'm also the guiding teacher for the Iowa City Zen Center, where I started my practice. And in addition, we do council practice, and we focus on the Three Tenets and do kind of the peacemaker-oriented Jukai ceremonies to kind of integrate the peacemaker work into the traditional Soto Rinzai realm. And another project that I started about the same time is called Mandala Cafe. And we do 3 things at this point. One is a culinary training job development program for folks who have some, as they say in the field, barriers to employment, things that have kind of interrupted their work flow or history. And we give kind of a broad introductory experience for folks to learn skills to be able to work in a kitchen. And then we work on placing them. And we also do kind of soft skills of meditation and some movement things and nutrition and ways for folks to kind of cope with both their work world as well as other parts of their life. And then we have a small catering company, which is on-the-job training as well as some part-time employment for folks, and also learning culinary skills. And then we do a weekly community meal in which we're preparing and handing out about 250 meals for folks at this point once a week. And that's volunteer opportunities for folks as well as an extension for folks in our Zen practice.
Wonderful. Thank you, Daiken. Thank you. I have an ulterior motive here, and that is, in listening to our guests and in discussing some of the topics that we'll bring up, my motive is to hopefully have all of us come away with a sense of, well, I can do something too. Sometimes we refer to taking action as healing, or I might even say wholing, WHOLIND, making whole. How do we promote healing when we take action? How are we healing when we take action?
Well, I guess what jumps out for me is part of what I'm healing is my own sense of distance and separation from others. So the healing action is certainly a response to something that seems wounded and hurt and broken in the world. But it's not just that, because that feels to me like a more transactional approach to doing things. And I think what I'm playing with or trying with is like, what is it to not have that be transactional, but completely relational? And what I'm really working on is healing what is in the way of deep and intimate and ongoing and consistent proximal relationships with people that I have kind of, for whatever reasons, pushed out of my field of vision or out of my sense of where I belong, where I live, who I am, etc. So that's how I think about it. Like, yeah, it is healing. It heals something in me.
When my actions are simple, intimate, ordinary, and kind towards any situation or person, then I know I'm on track. And if it doesn't meet those qualities, then I know I'm off track. And I can feel it when I'm on track or when I'm off track.
So, I'm a chaplaincy, a Buddhist chaplaincy educator, and the word spiritual care comes to mind. Just really caring, spiritually caring. I was with 2 students bearing witness down at Skid Row. We were just standing on the corner and just hanging out. And this older man who had a leg problem was making his way across the street. And one of my students said, I think he's going to ask us for money. I was like, And the other student was like, yeah, well, he looks, and just kind of making an assessment of this man, because he was kind of like dragging his leg and he seems in a lot of pain. And so when he got to the corner, I just said, good morning. And then he just lit up and he was just like, good morning. And this person who we had decided was a certain something was not, and there was just this closeness. So to me, those like small actions create this spiritual care for self and other that's mutual.
There was a moment this summer when our neighbor drowned on the sea just outside the building. And it was really tragic for all of us. And I was kind of pondering what to do. And as I'm the chair of the residence committee, I sent a message to all the tenants. I put a note to the post box that I will hold a small ceremony at the pier tonight. And if someone wants to join, you're all welcome to come. And about 40 people came, and they all participated in the ceremony with bells and everything. And it was really beautiful. But I feel that kind of bringing people together, it's something really important. Our work is kind of like realizing the oneness of life and kind of working with and trusting with the interconnectedness of life. I always feel that kind of bringing people together and work for something, and even for a small ceremony, it feels like that. Kind of work from the heart and seeing what works.
So many of the types of things that we can do when we take action are pretty clear, and they're not controversial, or there's not a lot of tension around them. But others there are, especially when we're looking at conflict on a larger scale, war, let's say, or those kinds of things. I want to ask you to maybe share and just kind of dig in a little bit to the notion of getting it wrong, of taking an action, and perhaps you're certain that it's the right thing to do, and maybe it turns out not to be.
Yeah, it's interesting because, of course we have to be skillful about what we're doing, but I find that if I get stuck in really rigid notions of something's gone right or something's gone wrong, that I'm in knowing, and our practice is not knowing. And so that's often an indicator for me that I've stepped out of not knowing practice, actually. So here at the encampment this week, for example, someone new moved in, and very complex psychology, and a lot of things fell apart in the encampment, which then triggered all kinds of other issues. The town zoning commission called me, neighbors called, the dentist office next door came over, people in the encampment came and said, oh, things are falling apart. And, a view on that could be, oh, well, we're doing something wrong. Really? I mean, what if I just not indulge that way of thinking and think instead, what's happening here? And how do I respond now? And how do we respond? So what we did was we called a council together. I don't know that there's really been a council of people living rough, and the dentist and the next door neighbor. But we pulled it together and said, well, let's talk about what's happening. What do we see? And it was hard and it was difficult. And, there's something in motion now. I don't know how it'll play out completely, but some people in the encampment are saying maybe the right thing, given all the different dynamics here, is to take down the encampment and for us to move somewhere else or to live separately for a while. That kind of insight came out of the group. And so right and wrong, we don't really know what's going on. What matters is that we're in each other's lives. And we're in each other's lives in a kind of intimate way, where we're building relationships and trust and the ability to navigate complex terrain and territory together as human beings, as people trying to find safety in the world, as people trying to live into some set of aspiration for what it means to be a whole and good person. And that's hard to figure out, filled with all kinds of rights and wrongs. But in the end, I think what we try to stay true to is staying in relationship with one another throughout it. And then right and wrong doesn't have such a powerful impact somehow on our thinking.
Yeah, Joshin, I like that part. And you started with that also. Part of the question that I made in my notes was, is there such a thing as it being wrong? And I think you've given voice to that question. Perhaps there isn't. Anyone else have a thought about this?
So there's a quote that I'm fond of from a Theravadan monk. Right now, it's like this. And so wherever we find ourselves, it's just this as it is, and it can't be any different. And so these ideas of right and wrong become somewhat fluid and don't have the gravity that they do kind of in our general world, and understanding that, we have intention and attention and we do our best in a given moment. And as soon as we start to make those distinctions between right and wrong and good and bad, we're going to move things in such a way that may not be as open or as available as just being in this not knowing. And I remember one thing that Byrnes said once upon a time was that somebody was asking him about one of the projects that we were working on, and Byrnes said, we do something and we create something gets put into place, and then later on somebody comes along and makes it better. And it will always kind of move towards being, the next best thing, whatever that is in this moment. And so every moment is this opportunity to just do our best and to not be so worried about whether or not it's the right thing to do. And also, understand it will change and become something else later in the day or tomorrow.
Just to maybe continue from the previous thought, that not to shy out and just to do it if it feels right at the moment, even though there might be consequences, and not to kind of be afraid of that, because sometimes we get paralyzed when we start to think that if it's a right or wrong situation and so forth, and just to be brave enough to do something.
Let's shift a little bit. When we talk about taking action, we allow for the option or the possibility of doing nothing. How do we know that when we choose to do nothing, we're not just avoiding the risk of stepping forward?
I know when things are so polarized on certain issues that I feel incapacitated. I don't know how to respond. But then I'm in the not knowing. And maybe it's better just not to respond until something becomes clear.
I also think, sometimes it's easier to bow to all the different aspects of the local community than it is to bow to all of the different aspects of me. And part of what I learned a little bit by going through this is I have to honor my paralysis, honor my fear, honor my doubt, honor my altruism. I have to honor my bold next step, what feels like a bold next step to me. What is it to bear witness and to honor every part of myself here as well, as a way of liberating myself from getting stuck in any one of those spaces? Because certainly there are times when I'm like, I'm terrified here, or I am really out of my depth, or I'm working outside of my usual resources. Does that mean I shouldn't step forward? And sometimes it is. I just have to honor that part of myself. I'm afraid, or I'm doubtful. But to not dishonor that part, to not pathologize that part of me, because I believe wisdom is hidden in there too. And so take the time to let the wisdom reveal itself.
So, Joshin, in some circumstances, indeed, you would not act.
There are many circumstances I don't act.
Yeah.
Sometimes for good reason, because I think non-action is the best action. And sometimes because I'm experiencing a little bit of confusion or paralysis. And I think, well, that's what's here right now.
For me, the difference in this paralysis, like when Joshin's talking about the paralysis and fear, like the story that came up is a couple of times I took a group of people to hand out food and blankets in MacArthur Park in Los Angeles, and 3 different times, basically. Each time we ended up bearing witness to someone ODing and almost dying, and watching people try to revive them with Narcan. And there's a paralysis, where I'm I don't know what to do. And it's a serious situation. And then I second guess myself. I'm like, is this a good idea to have people come and bear witness? But that's that's really what's happening right outside our doors. And so there is this sort of fear, questioning, paralysis, which to me seems healthy thing to go through and then to talk about as a group. What does everyone think about what happened or what we just bear witness to? And so if I'm thinking there's two sides or only two sides, then I'm stuck. And so how do I open up and see there's many sides? And to me, that's getting unstuck.
When I was growing up, there was a church on our way home, and they would put up some sort of like pithy saying each week. And I remember one of them was that has stuck with me all these years is not to decide is to decide. So not making a choice or not engaging in an action is on some level is our choice or is our action. And I think it's important to take responsibility for that and not blame oneself for the inactivity or whatever feelings might be behind it, but just to say, oh, okay, so in this moment, I'm choosing to not act or to not speak or to not do something, and just to participate in that as fully as we can and realize that it's okay wherever we find ourselves and that it's okay to not act or to not respond, and to wait and to be patient, have patience and kind of forbearance to see if there might be something that unfolds a little further down the line, which will influence or flavor whatever this moment is.
I'm frustrated about whether I'm doing enough, because I realize that I'm in a good position of doing things. I hold free meditations for people who need that once a week, and I work with the climate activists, and I'm working on establishing an apartheid-free zone for our community and so forth. And I'm doing lots of voluntary work, even though I don't really have time for it, but even though I try to fill my time that way, and I have a teenage son and a wife, and life is very busy. I rarely have any time left on my day. But even though I'm constantly kind of frustrated that whether I should just take a car and drive to Ukraine and get some bullet vests for people like our Polish peacemakers do, whether I should do that. And I have friends who've taken a bus to Ukraine and get some people out from there and take a boat to Gaza like Greta Thunberg. There's so many things that I could do, and I feel it the calling, but it's frustrating, and it's a constant pain, I think. But still, I cook the meals for my son and see that he goes to bed on time, and I feel that there is this kind of closer, intimate relationship and importance that I'm here. And I feel that there is a duty to be done. But still, there is this nagging sense that I could do more. And am I doing enough?
I'm glad you raised that. Let's stay on that topic a little bit more. I think it's a voice in our head. But talk about how that feels to kind of question, am I doing enough?
There are times when I think we think of ourselves as quite fragile. And we certainly have fragility, and we're vulnerable. And some of us are prone to burnout and overdoing it, I also think we practice with a lot of rigor and vigor and energy, and we bring ourselves and stand right at the edge. And sometimes if we have the nagging feeling, am I doing enough? We have to look. What is the suffering side of that question, and what is the flourishing side of that question? Is this part of my compulsion that leads me to this question? Or is it my aspiration that leads me to this question? Is it my fear and sense of fragility, or is it my love for the world? And maybe even setting those up as either ors isn't exactly right. But I don't think we should let ourselves off too easily from the question. I believe we are incredibly well-resourced. I believe many of our organizations are not operating fully to capacity. I think more can be done. And I think in order to do more, we have to purify our intention and understand why we should do more. So, I have to check that a lot. There's a lot of conversation inside me and with others about that balance. But I don't think we should run too quickly to the place of we need to protect ourselves. In the Gate of Sweet Nectar, the line that jumps out to me all the time is, with all our spirit, with all our love, with all our might. We vow to accomplish the way, to invite suffering and misery no longer. That is the vow. And that's a how. That's not like how many hours are you spending working. It is how are you approaching your life and your resources and all the ingredients of your life, with all your spirit, with all your love, with all your might, inviting suffering and misery no longer. And, I think that's where, we encourage each other in that way. And then there's this kind of question, where does the vow take us? When we place that center in our lives, then how does that touch onto everything that we do? And that just is a different question than, I'm afraid of burning out. Because I think that fear of burning out, we're a little hypersensitive to. One of my teachers, Joan Halifax Roshi, who's known to be clear and direct. And one day we were in the room with her and we were saying, Roshi, we're exhausted, we're so tired, She said quite bluntly, that's because you're not practicing correctly. And, we were all offended at that. And there was something true in what she said, that part of the exhaustion was the unwillingness to give myself fully to what I'm doing. And I appreciated that.
Listening to this, I'm struck by how ordinary taking action can be. It isn't always dramatic. It's often just about relationships. It might be choosing to stay present when you'd rather turn away. Thank you for listening. Thank you for practicing. Geoff and I will be back together in a few weeks with our next episode of the Peacemakers Podcast. Until then, just take a small step.
The Peacemakers Podcast is a production of Zen Peacemakers, an international organization whose mission is to realize our oneness and relieve suffering through contemplative social action. You can find the full video recording of this podcast and more at www.zenpeacemakers.org and go to our media library.